Hi everyone, my name is Brendan. I'm a law graduate from Cambridge in the UK, and I'm here to present more tips for writing your personal statement as the application cycle now begins again. Today we're going to speak about how to talk about your motivations, which is often the recommended first step when writing a personal statement. As it is the first step, is an important one to get us out of that mental block. For writers in every area, writing the first few sentences are always the greatest issue because the mental block is the highest there. So hopefully this session will be useful to break out that mental block by assisting you to start. Here's the step. This is also step one, a detailed step one of my overall overview, which you can see in the last video where I give a summary of each section. This is the detailed version of the first section, talking about your motivations. Let's dive right in. So, I spoke about the first spark um, in the earlier session. So what first sparked your interest in law? This is an important thing for everyone to know, at least to some extent, if you're not 100% sure. There can be many different illustrations of this. For example, someone getting bullied. You could have seen someone being beaten up or being mentally harassed in some way, and you feel this isn't right, and you want to do something within the bounds of civility to prevent this from ever happening to anyone. That might give you that initial spark of justice, of what is just. It could be also a situation at a pro bono project. And remember earlier, I was talking about bringing the spark into a flame. Many times, people often see something in their earlier days and then they undertake a law specific work experience or volunteer pro bono um, thing, such to turn that spark into a flame. So developing that initial spark of interest into something greater. And a pro bono project is often many great ways to do so. I had a student who worked as a pro bono employment lawyer and was able to see the way different employers mistreat their workers, for example, dismissing them without adequate pay, or not communicating the terms of the contract fairly. And this is a situation where you feel, hey, this is unfair because the employer possesses such great bargaining power, which obviously puts the worker at a typical disadvantage. For that reason, you might feel there needs to be employment law and there needs to be laws in place to prevent this from happening. Therefore, this is a situation where you begin to tell yourself, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be an employment lawyer, I want to be a lawyer who protects the vulnerable in general. And that begins your interest in law. EPQ, this is a relatively new thing in the past 4 to 5 years, I think. Yes, 4 to 5 years. And this is something where you get to undertake a research project at your A level days. And as a, and as you're looking to A levels, and EPQ is often the way to look at what you're interested in. In fact, both Oxford and Cambridge dedicate a section um, of their website on the admission into their law degree, their respective law degrees, to speak about the importance of EPQ. They say, although it's not an essential requirement and it will never be a formal requirement, as in it will not be like you need to have an A star for EPQ to get in, it will definitely be looked at in your personal statement, and they encourage you to do it because it shows you taking interest in a certain area of law. It brings the skill of research and brings the skill of having an independent way of thinking, which is crucial, very crucial to a law degree. So, for example, a student of mine who has done an EPQ has researched into problems in the criminal justice system caused by the underfunding of it and how it disproportionately affected people um, of minority backgrounds. And this was an interesting and important and useful springboard in his personal statement to speak about. Recent news, there's a lot of news about wars going on in the world today. And some of you might think about the breach of international conventions during the armed conflict. For example, that civilians were attacked during this conflict, which goes against international conventions, or another word for international conventions is treaties that are there to prevent such armed conflict. Um, Finally, there's also reading a book. It's a very classic one. Many people often um, look at books from wri- written by Oxford or Cambridge professors. But one thing I do want to say, and this actually happened in my personal interview, was not to use the cliche books. I think at first, books like Is Eating People Wrong and What About Law were very popular books that were written for this purpose. But today, all students are using it, such that my interviewer personally told me that it was getting a bit boring to look at these books. I'll spend a bit more time on this, on choosing a book to read in the next section, or a few sections after that. But for now, what I want to tell you is that in reading a book, choose something that you like, that is original, not just something to get you in the law degree, but something you are passionate about, even if you didn't get to do a law degree. So books that I strongly suggest today that I think are relevant are Fake Law by The Secret Barrister. That's his name. It's an anonymous name. So not that I'm trying to keep it a secret. So Fake Law is addresses the issues of fake news that's prevalent today, and misrepresentation of law is one of those issues, which is where The Secret Barrister gets the term fake law. I'll give you an example, a daily example that actually pairs with the first thing I said. So someone getting bullied sounds like a very daily example as well. I'll give you another daily example to start your personal statement, and this will hopefully also show you that it doesn't need to be so complex. So I first got interested in law when my father's car was scratched. The other car had parked over the white parking line, taking up a few centimeters of the adjacent parking spot. My father parked at this adjacent parking spot as there were no other parking lots. The other car then exited and scratched my father's car, and his own car was damaged. He did not charge my father, but did not want to pay for damage to my father's car. This made me think of two things. Firstly, that parking lines were there because of some sort of law. I would only later figure out that it was the local council's regulations that that was the name of this law. But remember, just a brief jump in here. I didn't need to know, and as you as applicants don't need to know anything about law to get in. Um, but this is something you can mention to show you did your own future research. Going back to the scenario, however, the important thing is that I knew the parking lines were not just guidelines, but something with significance. This significance was obviously the legal weight, the enforcement power behind those words that make it law. And the second reason, this example told me that all circumstances needed to be taken into account. This was the last parking lot, so my father had to take it. It also was not so difficult for the first car driver, the one who scratched my father's car, to repark his car. And this, I pause here to show that this personal statement is able to balance between two competing sides of the scenario. His own father's interest, um, firstly, um, but then he compared it a bit more by saying this was unless there was an emergency. So he recognizes that if the first car driver had an emergency, perhaps it's a bit more understandable that he parked in quite a careless way, and perhaps his wife was going into labor and he therefore needed to quickly park his car, or perhaps he needed to run in to help an elderly relative who was ill or who were going through some issues. So that makes it a bit more understandable. But see, the skill here is balancing both sides. Thinking of all probable possibilities was something I enjoyed, and I realized I would enjoy doing the same as an academic discipline. So this part is of the personal statement speaks about a lawyer's and a law student's daily job. You get cases that look at all possibilities, and when you get your own hypothetical scenarios in your exams or in your interviews to try to apply, you need to think of all probable possibilities, approaching the same thing from several angles, which shows that law students' innate aptitude and analytical skill. So this is an example. Again, I want to emphasize it's a very daily example, but one that will actually work very well in a personal statement. It will help you stand out instead of just citing a passage from one of the commonly read books. But again, that doesn't mean that you should not cite books, and I'll dedicate another video on how to cite books very soon. So what I personally said back then, um, in how I started my personal statement. I spoke about how I enjoyed the multidisciplinary nature of law. By this, I meant that law involves various issues. Um, so often these issues interact, making for a complex and intellectually challenging intellectual puzzle. A bit of a tautology there, but I guess I love the intellectual part of it. Um, so what I mean by that is law, although there are black letter words on the start, they link with different social and moral considerations. And if you notice, there are so many types of law today. There's contract law, tort law, going a bit broader, there's space law, there's aviation law, there's shipping law, there's law for almost every sector. And I like how these often crisscross into an intellectually challenging puzzle. It is so I link that with something that I and a subject that I enjoyed learning about. It is why I personally enjoyed subjects like the matrimonial consequences upon divorce. This was a sub-module of family law, as it combines the social aspects of understanding family dynamics with the technical aspects of property and trust. This is very true, as upon divorce it's not just concerns to do with the children, but it's concerns to do with the property. And especially for very wealthy families, that they might have a lot of family businesses with a lot of legal relations of property matters, or a lot of trust rights vested in the property. Um, for that reason, separating the property upon the divorce creates a lot of complex consequences, which we as lawyers must step in to do. This brings me to the end of this section, starting your personal statement and also talking about your motivations. I will come back with my next section in the next video, that is linking your pre-university subjects, which are typically A levels and IB, but not exclusively, to law, to studying law in more specifically. For now, um, thanks for watching. Do like and subscribe. And I do personal tutoring. Feel free to DM me for any tutoring advice, or just feel free to watch the video and be inspired by what is hopefully my helpful experience. Thank you and take care.